The film opens with a dynamic montage of Chris, a talented young African-American photographer, capturing life in the bustling city. The shots are colorful and vibrant, featuring street art, lively community events, intimate portraits of everyday people, and scenes of urban nightlife. His camera clicks rhythmically, capturing moments of laughter, contemplation, and everyday struggle.
In every picture, there's a story that's not seen. In every reflection, a shadow hidden in plain sight. As a photographer, I try to capture the truth hiding beneath the surface. But some truths can be more than what you bargain for.
The camera focuses on Chris's face reflecting in the window of his apartment, looking out at the city. The reflection fades into the rearview mirror of a car, showing Chris and Rose driving. The cityscape in the background slowly gives way to open fields and dense woods, symbolizing their journey into the unknown. Chris and Rose are in her car, driving towards her parents' rural estate. The scenery changes from urban to rural, emphasizing their isolation. The car moves through increasingly narrow and winding roads, surrounded by thick forests that cast long shadows, hinting at the foreboding nature of their destination.
It's so different from the city, isn't it? Just wait until you see the house. It's like stepping into another world.
Yeah, it's quiet. So your parents, they're cool with me being,
Chris, they're going to love you. Dad would have voted for Obama a third time if he could. You have nothing to worry about.
After a somewhat tense but uneventful drive, Chris and Rose's trip takes a sharp turn when they hit a deer. The accident is sudden, causing Rose to swerve the car. The camera focuses on the aftermath. Rose checking on Chris, the front of the car damaged, and the deer lying on the side of the road. Chris insists on calling the police to report the accident, despite Rose's reluctance. When the police officer arrives, he assesses the situation and then turns his attention to Chris, asking for his ID even though Rose was driving.
Can I see your identification, sir?
Why? I wasn't driving.
He wasn't driving, and he hasn't done anything wrong.
The officer's flashlight beam lingers too long on Chris, his face inscrutable behind the glare. Rose becomes visibly upset, arguing with the officer, which unexpectedly works in Chris's favor as the officer backs down, deciding not to pursue Chris's ID further.
That was my first real clue. The way that cop looked at me, like I was a problem he was itching to solve. It's something I've seen before, something every black man sees at some point. Rose saw it too, but it was like she saw it for the first time.
This interaction is emblematic of the racial profiling that is prevalent in law enforcement. It's a manifestation of systemic racism, where black individuals are scrutinized beyond the norm. For many, such encounters are not just incidents, but a part of their daily reality.
This scene is critical as it not only highlights the everyday racism faced by African Americans, but also serves to create a crack in Rose's previously unblemished facade. It subtly foreshadows the deeper, more sinister racial dynamics that will be revealed at her family's estate. Chris's reaction, a mixture of resignation and alertness, paints a vivid picture of his constant state of vigilance, a survival mechanism developed in response to such societal attitudes. As they continue their drive, the mood in the car shifts. The earlier casual atmosphere is replaced with a more contemplative silence. Chris is introspective, wary, while Rose appears troubled, her previous naivety shaken by the encounter. This scene sets a more serious tone for their arrival at the estate, where the undercurrents of racism will become overtly dangerous. The car pulls up to a large, old-fashioned estate surrounded by dense woods. The house is grand, but has an air of being out of time, with ivy crawling up its stone walls and statues that watch ominously over the property. Chris and Rose exit the car. Dean and Missy Armitage, Rose's parents, come out to greet them. Dean is overly enthusiastic, clasping Chris's hand with both of his, while Missy offers a warm but piercing smile.
Chris, so wonderful to finally meet you. We've heard so much about you. Come in, come in. You must be tired after such a long drive.
Dinner will be ready soon. I hope you like lamb, Chris. It's Rose's favorite.
As I stepped into their world, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Beneath their warm smiles and hearty welcomes, there was something cold, something waiting in the silence.
The camera follows Chris as he enters the house, passing under an old, ornate archway, the threshold between his world and theirs. The door closes behind him with a heavy, echoing thud, symbolically cutting him off from the familiar and safe as the screen fades to black. This opening act sets up the juxtaposition of Chris's life against the mysterious, unsettling world he's about to enter, using visual contrasts, audio cues, and narration to build tension and foreshadow the disturbing discoveries to come. The garden party is set in a beautifully manicured lawn surrounded by blooming flowers. The guests, all white, are dressed in elegant, summery outfits. The atmosphere is light and cheerful on the surface, but there's an underlying tension. Chris moves among the guests, receiving overly curious glances and smiles that don't quite reach the eyes. The garden party is set in a beautifully manicured lawn surrounded by blooming flowers. The guests, all white, are dressed in elegant, summery outfits. The atmosphere is light and cheerful on the surface, but there's an underlying tension. Chris moves among the guests, receiving overly curious glances and smiles that don't quite reach the eyes. Chris interacts with the guests, who are peculiarly interested in him, asking invasive questions about his physical abilities, artistic talents, and views on urban culture. Meanwhile, he notices other black individuals serving drinks and food. They move robotically, their expressions vacant.
The sunken place can be seen as a profound metaphor for systemic oppression. It's a state where an individual is silenced and powerless, observing the world but unable to affect it. This represents the marginalization of minorities, who are often seen but not genuinely heard in society.
Inside the house, Chris excuses himself from the party to use the bathroom, but instead, driven by a nagging curiosity, explores the hallway filled with family photos. He finds a hidden door leading to a dimly lit room filled with a collection of photographs not displayed to the public. Chris discovers a box filled with dozens of photos. As he flips through them, his confusion turns to horror. Each photo shows Rose with a different black partner, each looking happy and unaware of their impending fate.
What is this, Rose? What's happening here?
You weren't supposed to find that.
A close-up of Missy's face as she stirs her tea with a silver spoon, the clinking sound rhythmic and hypnotic. The setting shifts to the parlor where Missy convinces Chris to discuss his mother's death under the guise of helping him with his grief. As they talk, Missy's questions grow more invasive, and the camera focuses on the teacup's swirling motion. Chris's eyelids grow heavy. The room blurs as he falls into a trance.
Just listen to the sound of my voice and the clink of the spoon against the cup. Now sink into the floor.
Wait, no!
Chris is suspended in a dark void, his face contorted in terror. The camera pulls back, showing him alone in an endless darkness, encapsulating the isolation and helplessness of the sunken place. This part of Act 2 drives the narrative forward, intensifying the horror as Chris discovers the chilling truth about Rose and her family. The psychological underpinnings of the sunken place are revealed both visually and through dialogue, emphasizing the film's themes of systemic racism and personal horror. The act ends with Chris trapped both physically and metaphorically, setting up a tense climax for his struggle to escape. The atmosphere is charged with tension. The once inviting Armitage house now looks like a labyrinthine prison, with dark hallways and looming portraits watching Chris's every move. Lightning flashes intermittently, illuminating the house and casting sinister shadows. Chris, now fully aware of the danger, uses everything he has learned about the house and its inhabitants to evade capture. He remembers the cotton stuffing in the chair from the sunken place and uses it to block his ears, preventing Missy from hypnotizing him again. Chris sneaks through the house, using his photographer's eye to spot and avoid traps set by the family. He finds and weaponizes art pieces and other items he'd noticed earlier, using a croquet mallet as a weapon and a camera flash to momentarily stun Jeremy, one of the family members. A heart-pounding chase ensues as Chris battles Jeremy and then Dean, who attacks with a scalpel. Chris manages to turn the tables by setting the operating room on fire with a brazier. Quick cuts between close-ups of Chris's and the family's faces, the fire, and the house's eerie artifacts heighten the chaos and intensity. The dark, stormy night contrasts with the beam of headlights as Rod's TSA vehicle breaks through the night. The tension breaks slightly, replaced by a rush of relief as Chris sees his friend. Chris, bloodied and battered, stumbles out of the burning house, making his way to the car. He looks back once at the inferno he left behind, an emblem of his fight for freedom.
Told you not to go in that house.
You're the best, worst TSA agent ever.
As they drive away, the camera focuses on Chris's face, reflecting a mix of relief, sorrow, and unresolved anger. In the rearview mirror, the flames consume the Armitage house, a powerful image of Chris leaving his nightmare behind. The final scene is quieter, set in a police station where Chris gives his statement. The walls are stark, the lighting fluorescent, emphasizing the stark reality he's returned to. Chris finishes recounting his ordeal to a sympathetic detective who promises to investigate. Chris walks out into the dawn of a new day, the morning light symbolizing a new beginning, but also casting long shadows, reminders of the past.
We'll take it from here, Mr. Washington. You've been through enough.
It's not just about me. It's about all the others.
The film ends with Chris walking away from the camera, his figure gradually shrinking into the distance. A man forever changed, walking into an uncertain future.
Some battles are fought in the light, others in the shadows. But every picture tells a story, and mine is just one among many. The fight continues.
This ending leaves the audience contemplating the broader implications of Chris's story, tying back to the pervasive issues of racism and control, and setting a tone that mixes personal resolution with ongoing societal challenges.
Sometimes the real horror is hiding behind a friendly smile and an open door. What we fear isn't always in the shadows. Sometimes it's walking beside us, masked by familiarity and good intentions turned grotesque. We can't turn a blind eye anymore. Not to the subtle racism dressed up as preference, not to the overt hatred hiding behind fake smiles. We need to confront these horrors, not just for the victims, but for ourselves, for our future.
These interviews discuss the underlying racial dynamics in America, exploring how systemic racism and cultural stereotypes perpetuate discrimination and exploitation. Topics include racial profiling, the origins of racial stereotypes, and the social impact of these dynamics on minority communities. Documentaries that trace the history of systemic racism in the United States, from slavery and segregation to modern-day inequalities in justice and economic opportunities. These films provide context for the systemic issues highlighted in the movie. Scholarly articles and opinion pieces that explore how racial stereotyping affects individuals and communities psychologically. These articles discuss the impact of racism on mental health, including anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder, which can arise from chronic exposure to discriminatory practices.
As we peel back layers of seemingly benign interactions, we uncover the latent prejudices that fuel a cycle of fear and hatred. Education, awareness, and open dialogue are our best tools to dismantle these prejudices. This isn't just my story. It's a story that echoes through the lives of many, a call to look beyond the surface and confront the real horror.
The film ends with Chris standing by a window, looking out as the sun rises over the city, a new day, symbolizing hope and the ongoing fight for change. The screen slowly fades to black, leaving the audience with the lingering question of how they, too, can contribute to societal change. Continuing clips of community forums, marches for racial equality, and educational workshops that have sprung up as a result of the story, showing the real-world impact and the ongoing struggle for justice and equality. Get Out is much more than a simple horror film. It is a poignant social commentary embedded within the entertainment value of a thriller. By blending psychological horror with acute observations of racial dynamics, Jordan Peele created a film that challenges viewers to reflect on their perceptions and biases regarding race and identity. The film's critical and commercial success underscores the power of genre films to catalyze discussions about deep and sometimes uncomfortable social issues. This analysis aims to provide a deeper understanding of Get Out, considering its thematic richness and cultural impact, much like the exploration of the concept of Black Indians in American history.